The water was rising too fast. Clara Ellis gripped the steering wheel tighter, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm battering New Haven. Her phone buzzed again. The nursing home. Third call in 10 minutes. Ms. Ellis, you need to get here now. The lower floor is flooding. Your aunt. I'm 5 minutes out, Clara shouted over the thunder. She wasn't. She was 15 minutes out, and every street seemed determined to prove it. The storm had turned New Haven into a disaster zone, transforming familiar roads into rivers. Clara's mind raced through options, discarding each one. Every shelter would be packed, every hospital overwhelmed. She needed somewhere secure, somewhere powerful enough that even a natural disaster couldn't touch it. She dialed a number she'd sworn never to use outside business hours. This is Dante Vercelli. The voice was calm, controlled, exactly what you'd expect from a man who ran half of New Haven's underworld. Clara had met him exactly twice for legal consultations about his shipping company, consultations where she'd barely masked her disgust at what she knew his empire really transported. Mr. Vercelli, it's Clara Ellis. I need a favor. A pause. Attorneys don't usually ask me for favors, Ms. Ellis. They bill me for them. My grandaunt's nursing home is flooding. I need somewhere safe to take her. Somewhere the storm can't reach. Another pause, longer this time. Clara could almost hear him calculating, weighing risks and benefits like he was deciding between shipping routes. Bring her to the mansion, Dante said finally. I'll have the gates open. Clara didn't thank him. She just hung up and drove faster. 20 minutes later, she was half carrying, half dragging Lydia through the rain toward the massive iron gates of the Vercelli mansion. Her grandaunt was 83, sharp as broken glass, and apparently determined to critique every step of their evacuation. This is ridiculous, Clara. A Mafia compound? Really? It's that or swim, Aunt Lydia. I've swum in worse, Lydia muttered, but she kept moving. The gates opened like the jaws of some mechanical beast. Security guards materialized from the shadows, professional and silent, escorting them up the long driveway to the mansion proper. It was excessive in every way. Too large, too ornate, too aggressively wealthy. The kind of house that screamed new money trying to look like old power. The front door opened before they reached it. Dante Vercelli stood in the entrance, backlit by warm light that made him look almost human. Almost. The snake tattoo coiling up the left side of his neck ruined the illusion, black ink seeming to pulse with its own dark life. Clara had researched that tattoo. Urban legend said Dante got it the first time he ordered a killing, that each scale represented a life taken. She didn't believe that. The snake would need to be the size of an anaconda, but the symbolism was clear enough. This was a man who wore his violence like jewelry. Ms. Ellis, Dante said, his voice carrying that same controlled calm from the phone. Please, come in. Then he saw Lydia. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the marble facade. His eyes widened fractionally, and for just a moment, so brief Clara almost missed it, his shoulders dropped in what looked like shock. Or recognition. Or both. Lydia Hayes, Dante said, and his voice was different now, younger somehow. Lydia stepped forward, shaking off Clara's supporting hand. She studied Dante with eyes that missed nothing, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Well, little Dante Vercelli. Look at you now, all grown up and playing devil. To Clara's absolute astonishment, Dante's knee bent slightly, his posture shifting into something that wasn't quite a bow but was definitely deference. The most feared man in New Haven, slightly lowering himself before an 83-year-old woman in a soaked cardigan. You're welcome in my home, Dante said quietly. For as long as you need. Lydia's smile widened. You still think you're untouchable, devil? I can see through your scars. Always could. Before we go deeper into this storm-soaked reunion, hit that like button if you're already hooked. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. New York? London? Sydney? Tokyo? I love seeing this community spread across the globe. Your support makes these stories possible. Now, let's see what history Lydia and Dante share. Clara stood in the foyer, dripping on marble that probably cost more than her car, trying to process what she was witnessing. Her grandaunt, sweet, Charitable Lydia, who ran youth programs and baked cookies for community centers, was staring down a Mafia boss like he was a misbehaving student. And he was taking it. Clara, stop gawking, Lydia said without looking at her. Dante, be useful. Get us some dry clothes and tea. Earl Grey, not that bitter nonsense you probably drink. Of course, Dante said, gesturing to a woman who'd appeared silently beside them. Rosa will show you to your rooms. Anything you need, just ask. As Rosa led them away, Clara glanced back to see Dante still standing in the foyer, hand touching his snake tattoo in what she'd learned was his thinking gesture. He looked like a man who'd just had his entire worldview tilted sideways. The room they gave Lydia was larger than Clara's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the storm still raging outside, but inside was warm, dry, safe. Everything the nursing home wasn't. Aunt Lydia, Clara said once they were alone. What just happened? How do you know Dante Vercelli? Lydia settled into an armchair that probably cost 5 figures, looking entirely too comfortable in a crime lord's mansion. I knew him when he was young. Angry. Scared. Before he became whatever he thinks he is now. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting tonight, dear. Now go change before you catch pneumonia. And Clara, Lydia's eyes sharpened. Watch him closely. Men like Dante tell themselves stories about who they are. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can make them question those stories. Clara changed into borrowed clothes, designer items that fit surprisingly well, and tried to make sense of the evening. She'd accepted a consultation job with Vercelli shipping 3 months ago, knowing full well it was a front for something darker. She'd told herself she was just reviewing maritime law, just helping with legitimate business operations. She'd ignored the whispered warnings from colleagues, the knowing looks from other attorneys who'd worked with Dante before. But standing in his mansion, wearing clothes he'd provided, sheltering from a storm under his protection, she couldn't ignore anything anymore. She found Dante in what he called his study, though it looked more like a war room. Maps of New Haven covered one wall, marked with colored pins she didn't want to understand. Computer screens showed security feeds from across the city. This was the nerve center of an empire built on violence and control. Ms. Ellis, Dante said, looking up from a tablet. I trust the accommodations are acceptable? They're fine. Thank you. Clara stepped inside, uninvited. We need to talk about why you're really consulting me on shipping regulations. Dante's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. Direct. I appreciate that. I'm serious, Mr. Vercelli. I took this job because I needed the money, but I'm not stupid. Your company moves more than legal cargo. And yet you haven't quit. Dante set down the tablet, giving her his full attention. That was the thing about him. When he focused on you, it felt like being pinned under a microscope. Why is that, Ms. Ellis? Because I'm good at what I do, and you're paying me well to do it. But that doesn't mean I approve of. She gestured vaguely at the maps, the screens, the entire apparatus of organized crime surrounding them. This, Dante said calmly, keeps New Haven stable. The drugs coming through my ports are regulated, not poisoned with fentanyl. The gambling operations pay out fairly. The protection I offer is real protection, not extortion. I've built a system that reduces chaos. By controlling it, Clara countered. That's not the same as eliminating it. No, Dante agreed. But elimination is a fantasy. Control is achievable. They stared at each other, the storm rattling windows behind them, and Clara felt something she hadn't expected, curiosity. Not about his business, but about him. How did someone become this? How did you wake up one day and decide that controlling the underworld was your calling? Lydia said she knew you when you were young, Clara said. What happened to that version of you? Dante's hand went to his tattoo. He learned that good intentions don't stop bullets. That mercy gets people killed. That the world runs on power, and if you don't have it, you're prey. That's a sad philosophy. It's a surviving one. Before Clara could respond, the door burst open. A man in his 40s, built like a brick wall with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, stormed in. He stopped when he saw Clara, annoyance flashing across his face. Boss, we need to talk. Private. Rico, this is Clara Ellis, our legal consultant. Whatever you need to say can wait until. No, it can't, Rico interrupted, which Clara suspected wasn't something people usually did to Dante. It's about the old woman. Every molecule of warmth drained from the room. Dante stood slowly, and Clara understood in that moment why people feared him. It wasn't size or strength. It was the absolute certainty that he could hurt you and sleep soundly afterward. Her name is Lydia, Dante said, each word precisely cut. And she's a guest. Speak accordingly. Rico shifted uncomfortably. Right, Lydia. Boss, some of the guys are wondering why we're housing civilians during a crisis. Security risk and all that. The guys are wondering. Dante walked around the desk, moving with predatory grace. Or you're wondering? Does it matter? Yes, Rico, it matters significantly. Because if the guys are wondering, I can address their concerns. But if you're questioning my judgment, we have a different conversation entirely. Clara watched the power dynamics play out like a chess match. Rico was loyal, that much was obvious. But he was also testing boundaries, seeing how much of his boss's recent softness was real. I'm just saying, Rico pressed, we don't know these people. The lawyer's one thing, but an old woman? What if she? What? Dante's voice dropped to something dangerous. What exactly do you think an 83-year-old woman is going to do, Rico? Overthrow my organization with her knitting needles. It's not about what she can do. It's about perception, about showing weakness. Dante was in Rico's space now, close enough that the lieutenant had to tilt his head back slightly. Let me be very clear. Lydia Hayes stays as long as she wants. If anyone, and I mean anyone, makes her feel unwelcome, they'll answer to me personally. Are we understood? Rico swallowed hard. Yeah, boss. Understood. Good. Now get out. Rico left quickly, and Clara found herself alone with Dante again. The temperature in the room slowly normalized. I apologize for that, Dante said, returning to his desk. Rico means well, but he sometimes forgets there are different kinds of strength. You really care about her, Clara observed. Lydia, this isn't just hospitality. No, Dante admitted. It's not. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the storm through the windows. Then, surprisingly, he spoke. I was 17. Los Angeles, early 2000s. I'd fallen in with a crew running drugs for one of the cartels. Thought I was invincible. Thought I understood how the world worked. Then a deal went bad, and I took 3 bullets. Should have died in an alley. Clara sat down without being invited, sensing this was a story Dante didn't tell often. Lydia ran a youth outreach program. She found me, called an ambulance, visited me in the hospital. When I got out, she offered me a choice. Keep running with the crew, or work for her program. Help other kids avoid my mistakes. You chose the program, Clara guessed. For 2 years, Dante said. I was good at it. Really good. I understood those kids because I was them. I thought maybe I could make a difference, you know? Save lives through compassion instead of violence. What changed? Dante's smile was bitter. Reality. One of the kids I was mentoring, Miguel, 15 years old, smart as hell. He got caught in crossfire between 2 gangs. Died instantly. I tried to do things the right way, the peaceful way, and he died anyway. That's when I learned that good intentions don't stop bullets. So you became this, Clara said quietly. You decided if you couldn't save people through compassion, you'd control them through fear. I decided I'd never be powerless again, Dante corrected. And yes, fear is part of that. But so is order. Structure. I prevent more Miguels than I create. You can't possibly know that. No, Dante agreed. But I choose to believe it. Because the alternative, that I've built an empire on nothing but violence and ego, that's unbearable. Clara understood then. Dante wasn't a psychopath. He was something potentially more dangerous. A man who'd convinced himself that his terrible choices were necessary. That the snake tattoo on his neck represented not cruelty, but cold logic. Lydia made you question that, Clara said. That's why you're unsettled. Dante touched his tattoo again. She reminds me of who I was before I became this. And I'm not sure I like the comparison. Over the next 2 days, the storm raged and the mansion became its own strange ecosystem. Clara worked from one of the guest rooms, reviewing shipping contracts, and trying not to think too hard about what they really represented. Dante conducted business from his study, managing an empire through phone calls and video conferences. And Lydia wandered the mansion like she owned it, charming and terrifying people in equal measure. Clara found her grandaunt in the library on the second afternoon, reading a first edition that probably cost more than a car. "You're enjoying this," Clara accused. "The mansion, the drama, all of it." Lydia looked up, eyes twinkling. "I'm 83, dear. At my age, everything interesting is a gift. And watching Dante Vercelli wrestle with his conscience? That's very interesting. You're manipulating him." "I'm reminding him of his humanity," Lydia corrected. "There's a difference. That boy, and yes, he'll always be that bleeding boy to me. He built walls so high he forgot there was a world outside them. Someone needs to make him remember." "Why you?" "Because I saw him before the walls existed," Lydia said simply. "And because unlike everyone else in his life, I don't want anything from him. Not money, not power, not protection. That makes me dangerous." Clara couldn't argue with that. She'd seen how Dante's people looked at Lydia, with confusion, sure, but also with a strange kind of respect. The old woman who made the devil kneel. That evening, Clara witnessed exactly how dangerous Lydia could be. Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 20. Just the three of them at one end of an absurdly long table, served by staff who moved like ghosts. It was surreal, eating pasta carbonara in a crime lord's mansion while discussing community theater like they were at a suburban book club. The local production of Hamilton was adequate, Lydia said, twirling linguine, though their Jefferson lacked conviction. "I haven't been to theater in years," Dante admitted. "Too busy being terrifying?" Lydia asked sweetly. "Too busy staying alive. Same thing for you, I imagine." Rico entered then, flanked by two other men Clara recognized from the security detail. He was carrying something, a briefcase, expensive looking. He moved to Dante's side, started to open it, and somehow, impossibly, the briefcase shifted. A gun appeared in Rico's hand, not pointed at anyone but suddenly present, a threat waiting to be deployed. The world slowed down. Rico's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. He'd been checking the weapon as he walked, habit and carelessness combining into potential catastrophe. The gun wasn't aimed at anyone specific, but the barrel swept past Lydia's direction for a fraction of a second. Dante moved like lightning. One moment he was seated. The next he had Rico's wrist locked, the gun twisted away and Dante's other hand at Rico's throat. The lieutenant gasped, face reddening, as Dante slammed him against the nearest wall hard enough to crack plaster. "Did you just," Dante said, his voice perfectly calm, "point a weapon in Lydia's direction?" "Boss, I wasn't. It was an accident. I didn't mean." Dante's hand tightened. "In this house, Lydia is untouchable. Not protected. Untouchable. The same rules that apply to me apply to her. Do you understand what that means, Rico?" Clara sat frozen, watching a man she'd thought civilized reveal the monster underneath. This was the Dante who'd built an empire on fear. This was the snake, coiled and ready to strike. "It means," Dante continued, his hand still at Rico's throat, "that threatening her, even accidentally, is threatening me. And we both know how I respond to threats." "Dante," Lydia said mildly, not even looking up from her pasta, "you're ruining dinner. Also, you're teaching Clara all the wrong lessons about conflict resolution." The spell broke. Dante released Rico, who stumbled away gasping. The gun disappeared, into whose custody Clara couldn't track. Dante straightened his shirt, composed again in seconds. "My apologies," he said to Lydia. "You're right, of course. Rico, we'll discuss this later." "Leave." Rico left quickly, the other men following. Silence settled over the dining room like ash. "Well," Lydia said brightly, "this carbonara is excellent." Rosa outdid herself. Clara stared at her grandaunt. "How are you so calm?" "Because I'm not in danger," Lydia said. "Dante would burn this city to the ground before letting harm come to me. Isn't that right, devil?" Dante had returned to his seat, but he hadn't picked up his fork. "Yes," he said quietly, "which is very sweet and entirely too dramatic," Lydia continued. You've changed, Dante. When you were young, you protected people because you couldn't bear to see them hurt. Now you protect people because you've decided they're yours. Do you see the difference? Imagine this. You're running an empire built on fear and control. Someone you care about is threatened, accidentally, maybe, but threatened nonetheless. Do you respond with violence like Dante, or find another way? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're gripped by this moral tightrope walk, hit that like button. It tells me you want more stories that make you think. Dante's hand went to his tattoo. The first way got Miguel killed. The second keeps people alive. Does it? Lydia challenged. Or does it just give you the illusion of control over an uncontrollable world? There's nothing wrong with control. There is when it's all you have, Lydia said. When fear becomes your only tool, you forget how to connect, how to be human. Clara watched this exchange like a tennis match, fascinated despite herself. Her grandaunt was doing something remarkable. She was treating a mafia boss like a person. Not a monster to be feared, not a villain to be condemned, just a person making choices and living with consequences. Aunt Lydia, Clara said carefully, maybe this isn't the time. Oh, it's exactly the time, dear. The storm has us trapped together, and I'm old enough that subtlety bores me. Lydia turned back to Dante. You know what I see when I look at you? That 17-year-old boy, bleeding in an alley, scared and angry and determined to never be weak again. Except you're not 17 anymore, and you're not that powerless boy. So why do you still act like him? Dante stood abruptly. Because that boy learned the most important lesson of his life. That mercy is a luxury. That compassion gets you killed. That the only thing that matters in this world is power and love. Lydia asked. Connection? Trust? Our liabilities, Dante said flatly. Things people use against you. Or things that make life worth living. Clara interjected, surprising herself. My grandaunt spent decades helping people with no expectation of return. She's lived a full, meaningful life. Can you say the same, Mr. Vercelli? Dante looked at her, and for a moment Clara saw something crack in his armor. Doubt, maybe. Or longing for something he'd convinced himself he couldn't have. I've kept people alive, he said. That's meaningful. By making others afraid, Clara countered. That's not meaning. That's control masquerading as purpose. You don't understand this world. No, I understand perfectly, Clara interrupted. You've built an empire on the lie that fear and control are the same as safety and order. But they're not. One prevents chaos through humanity. The other just manages it through violence. And the second you stop being the most violent person in the room, your entire system collapses. The words hung in the air, sharp and true. Dante stared at Clara like she'd slapped him. Then, slowly, he sat back down. You sound like Lydia did 20 years ago, he said quietly. Good, Lydia said. Someone needs to. Now eat your dinner before it gets cold, and stop brooding. You're terrible at it. Despite everything, Dante smiled. Actually smiled. Genuine and brief, and all the more striking for its rarity. Clara felt her heart do something complicated in response. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. There was a real person under the snake tattoo. Someone capable of more than violence and control. If only he'd let himself be. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She wandered the mansion's halls, marveling at how the storm had trapped them in this strange bubble outside normal reality. Outside these walls, Dante was a feared criminal. Inside, he was just a man having dinner with two women who challenged everything he believed about himself. She found Lydia in the conservatory, a glass room filled with plants that should have died in New Haven's harsh winters, but somehow thrived under Dante's care. Can't sleep either? Lydia asked. Clara sat beside her grandaunt on a bench that faced floor-to-ceiling windows. The storm had finally started to weaken, rain falling in sheets instead of torrents. I keep thinking about what you said at dinner, Clara admitted. About Dante protecting people because he's decided they're his instead of because he can't bear to see them hurt. There's something sad about that. There's something tragic about it, Lydia corrected. That boy had such capacity for compassion. I watched him cry over kids he couldn't help, saw him give his own food to people hungrier than him. He felt everything so deeply. What happened? Lydia was quiet for a long moment. Miguel happened, and Dante's response to Miguel's death wasn't to grieve and continue the work. It was to decide that grief itself was weakness, that feeling deeply made you vulnerable. So he built walls, chose power over connection, convinced himself that controlling chaos was the same as preventing it. Can someone like that change? Clara asked. I don't know, Lydia said honestly, but I think having you here helps. You challenge him differently than I do. I remind him of his past. You make him question his present. Clara thought about the way Dante looked at her sometimes, not with desire exactly, but with a kind of hungry curiosity, like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a variable that didn't fit his equations. I'm not here to save him, Clara said firmly. I'm not that naive. No, Lydia agreed. But you might be here to show him he's worth saving. There's a difference. The storm broke the next morning. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through windows, the first clear sky in 3 days. Checking her phone, she found messages from the nursing home. The flooding had receded, repairs were underway, residents could return within 48 hours. Their refuge in the Vercelli mansion was ending. She found Dante on the terrace, overlooking New Haven as the city slowly emerged from disaster. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, his snake tattoo somehow darker in the morning light. The storm's over, Clara said, joining him at the railing. I heard. Dante didn't look at her. Rosa is preparing breakfast. Lydia's already up, terrorizing my kitchen staff with her opinions on proper tea preparation. Clara smiled. That sounded exactly right. Mr. Vercelli, she started, then corrected herself. Dante, thank you. For taking us in. For keeping us safe. You're welcome. He finally looked at her. Your Grandaunt is remarkable. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be around someone who saw me as human instead of useful. Maybe that's something you could have more of. People who challenge you to be better instead of just being loyal. In my world, challenge is often fatal. Then maybe, Clara said carefully, it's time to change your world. Before Dante could respond, shouting erupted from inside the mansion. Then gunfire, sharp, unmistakable, terrifying. Dante moved instantly, pulling a gun from somewhere Clara hadn't noticed and positioning himself between her and the house. Stay behind me, he ordered, all business now. Don't move unless I tell you to. More gunfire. Breaking glass. Men yelling in Italian and English. Chaos spreading through the mansion like wildfire. Dante spoke into a phone that had appeared in his free hand. Report. Now. Clara couldn't hear the response, but she saw Dante's jaw tighten. Victor Moreno, he said. Should have known. Who? Rival. Ambitious. Stupid. Dante grabbed Clara's arm, not roughly but firmly. We need to get you and Lydia to the safe room. They ran through corridors Clara barely recognized, Dante navigating by instinct, gun raised and ready. They found Lydia in the library, calmly watching armed men trade shots in the foyer below through the second-floor railing. Oh good, Lydia said as they arrived. I was starting to worry you'd miss all the excitement. Lydia, we need to move, Dante said urgently. I'm not hiding in a panic room like some damsel, Dante. I'm too old for that nonsense. Lydia. Besides, she continued, moving to the railing deliberately, I rather think those men down there need to see exactly who they're threatening. Before Dante could stop her, Lydia stepped into full view of the firefight below. Several masked men looked up, guns swinging toward her. Dante's arm shot around her waist, pulling her back even as he aimed his own weapon at the men below. That's Lydia Hayes, Dante shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. Anyone who touches her dies screaming. Anyone who even looks at her wrong dies faster. She is untouchable in this house. The fighting didn't stop, but something shifted. The attackers hesitated, exchanging glances. Dante used the moment, firing with precision that spoke of long practice. 2 men went down. The others scattered, seeking cover. Lydia, Dante said, still shielding both women with his body. You have to trust me. Please. Something in his voice, not command, but plea, made Lydia nod. They moved as a unit, Dante keeping himself between the women and any possible threat. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break her ribs. This was real. The violence, the danger, the casual way Dante navigated both. This was his daily reality. They reached a reinforced door. Dante punched in a code, and it swung open to reveal a room that looked like a bunker. Concrete walls, surveillance monitors, enough supplies to survive a siege. Inside, Dante ordered, "Lock it behind me. Don't open for anyone except me or Marco. I'll use the code phrase, Los Angeles. If anyone tries anything else, they're lying." "Where are you going?" Clara demanded. "To end this." Dante checked his gun, his movements efficient and cold. "Victor brought this to my home. Threatened people under my protection. There are consequences for that." He started to leave, but Lydia caught his arm. "Dante, don't become the monster they expect. Be better." Dante looked at her, and Clara saw the war in his eyes. The snake tattoo seemed to pulse, a reminder of every violent choice, every brutal decision. Then he leaned down and kissed Lydia's forehead, gentle and quick. "I'll try," he said. Then to Clara, "Keep her safe." The door closed. The lock engaged. Clara and Lydia were alone in the bunker while the mansion exploded with violence above them. "He's going to kill them," Clara said, her voice shaking. "All of them. You saw his face." "I saw a man trying very hard to be what he thinks he needs to be," Lydia corrected. She moved to the monitors, studying the different camera feeds. "Look." On the screens, Clara watched Dante move through the mansion with terrifying efficiency. But he wasn't shooting to kill anymore. He was disabling, disarming, creating chaos in the attackers' ranks without executing them. It was precise, controlled, almost surgical. One man raised a gun at Dante's back. Dante spun, shot the weapon out of the man's hand, then kicked him unconscious instead of finishing the job. "He's showing restraint," Clara breathed. "He's choosing not to kill when he could. He's choosing to be human," Lydia said, "even in the middle of violence." "That's growth, Clara. Painful, imperfect growth, but growth nonetheless." The firefight lasted another 10 minutes that felt like hours. Clara watched on the monitors as Dante and his security team, Marco prominently among them, systematically dismantled the attack. The mansion sustained damage, broken windows, bullet holes in walls, art that was probably priceless now ruined, but no bodies. Just incapacitated men, restrained and disarmed. Finally, it was over. The code knock came at the door, 3 sharp raps, a pause, 2 more. "Los Angeles," Dante's voice called through the steel. Clara opened the door. Dante stood there, blood on his shirt. Not his, Clara hoped, but otherwise intact. Behind him, the mansion looked like a war zone, but a victorious one. "It's over," Dante said. "You're safe." Lydia emerged from the bunker, surveying the damage with the calm of someone who'd seen worse. "Anyone dead?" "No," Dante said, and he sounded almost surprised. "Injured, restrained, but not dead. Victor Moreno's men will wake up in police custody with very detailed evidence of their crimes." "You're letting the police handle it?" Clara asked, shocked. "I'm letting the system work," Dante corrected. "For once." Lydia suggested I try being better. "This is what better looks like from where I'm standing." Marco appeared, looking rougher than Dante, but equally alive. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, but smiling grimly. "Boss, we've got them all contained. Moreno himself is in the basement. What do you want us to do with him?" Dante looked at Lydia, then at Clara. Clara could see the calculation in his eyes, the old patterns of thought trying to reassert themselves. Victor Moreno had attacked his home, threatened people under his protection. In Dante's world, that demanded death. But Lydia's words echoed, "Be better." "Bring him up," Dante said finally. "I want to talk to him." 10 minutes later, Victor, the Fong, Moreno knelt in the destroyed foyer, hands zip-tied behind his back, flanked by guards. He was younger than Clara expected, maybe late 30s, with the kind of desperate ambition that got people killed in this world. Dante stood before him, and Clara watched something fascinating unfold. "Victor," Dante said conversationally, "you made several mistakes today. First, you attacked my home. Second, you threatened people I care about. Third, You assumed I'd respond with the same violence you offered. That third one might save your life. Victor spat blood. Just kill me and get it over with, Vercelli. I knew the risks. I'm sure you did, Dante agreed. But I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to let you live. Confusion flickered across Victor's face. Clara understood it. In this world, death was expected. Mercy was the real terror. Here's what's going to happen, Dante continued. You're going to prison. Real prison, not the kind my money could get you out of. I'm turning over evidence of everything you've done, not just this attack, but every crime you've committed in the last 5 years. You'll serve real time. You're insane, Victor said. This is weakness. Everyone will see it as weakness. Then let them, Dante said simply. I'm tired of ruling through fear alone. Maybe it's time to try something else. He gestured to Marco, who pulled Victor to his feet. Take him to the police. Make sure they have everything they need for a conviction. As Victor was dragged away, still cursing and confused, Lydia stepped forward and did something Clara would never forget. She smiled at Dante, not her usual teasing smile, but something genuine and warm. That took courage, devil. Real courage. I'm proud of you. Dante's hand went to his tattoo, fingers tracing the snake's coils. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like I'm gambling with my empire. Maybe, Lydia said. Or maybe you're finally building something worth more than fear. The aftermath took hours. Police came and went, asking questions Clara helped answer from a legal perspective. The mansion slowly emptied of chaos, leaving only damage and possibility in its wake. Clara found Dante on the terrace again as evening approached, watching the sun set over New Haven. The city glittered below, beautiful and corrupt, full of people living lives Dante had spent years trying to control. Thank you, she said, joining him. For protecting us. For choosing not to kill. Don't thank me yet, Dante said. There will be consequences. Other rivals will test me. My own people will question my strength. This decision might cost everything I've built. But you made it anyway, Clara observed. Because 2 women I respect asked me to be better, Dante said. And because somewhere in the middle of that firefight, with my finger on the trigger, I realized I was tired. Tired of being the devil. Tired of the snake. His hand touched the tattoo again, and Clara understood what he was thinking. You could remove it, she said quietly. The tattoo. If you wanted. I've thought about it, Dante admitted. But I'm not sure I've earned the right to erase my past. Those choices are still mine. That violence is still part of me. It doesn't have to define your future, though, Clara said. People can change. Can grow. Dante looked at her, and in the fading light, he looked younger. Less like a crime lord and more like a man trying to figure out who he wanted to be. Stay, he said suddenly. Not just until the nursing home reopens. Stay and help me figure out what this empire becomes if it's not built on fear. Use your legal expertise to make my operations actually legitimate. Help me find a better way. Clara should have said no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that getting deeper into Dante's world was dangerous, foolish, potentially fatal. But she thought about the way he'd protected them, the restraint he'd shown during the attack, the genuine struggle in his eyes when he chose mercy over violence. I'll stay, she heard herself say. On 3 conditions. 1. You commit to actual legitimate business, not just better hidden crime. 2. You remove that tattoo. If you want to change, you need to shed the symbol of who you were. And 3. You let Lydia keep you honest. She sees through your bullshit better than anyone. Dante considered this, then extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it, and Clara felt like she was making either the best or worst decision of her life. Time would tell which. The nursing home reopened 2 days later. Lydia could have gone back to her familiar room, her familiar routines. Instead, she stayed at the mansion, claiming the library as her personal domain and terrorizing Dante's staff with her particular brand of elderly fearlessness. I'm staying to keep an eye on you, devil, she told Dante over breakfast one morning, 2 weeks after the attack. You need a conscience, and Clara needs backup. Besides, your library is better than the nursing homes. Dante smiled, something Clara noticed he was doing more frequently. You're always welcome, Lydia. For as long as you want. Good. Now about this tattoo removal. I've researched the best laser surgeons in New Haven. You're starting next week. Clara watched them banter, feeling something settle in her chest. This wasn't a perfect solution. Dante was still a man with blood on his hands, still someone who'd built power through violence. But he was trying to be something else, something better, and that effort mattered. Over the following months, Clara watched Dante systematically dismantle the most violent parts of his empire. Operations became more legitimate. Muscle became security consultants. Territories were negotiated rather than conquered. It wasn't smooth. There were challenges, rivals who tested him, moments when the old Dante emerged with cold efficiency, but the trend was undeniably toward something better. The tattoo came off in stages, each laser session erasing a bit more of the snake. Dante wore bandages on his neck, and without the tattoo, he looked different. Softer somehow, more human. Clara noticed women in his organization responding differently to him, with less fear and more respect. One evening, 6 months after the storm, Clara found Dante in his office. No longer the war room it had been, now just a normal executive space with fewer maps of criminal territories. I have the final numbers, she said, setting down a folder. Your shipping company is now 70% legitimate operations. Another year, and we can be completely clean. Dante studied the numbers, and Clara saw satisfaction in his eyes. It's working. Slower profits, but sustainable ones. Legal ones. And you're still alive, Clara added. Still respected. Just for different reasons now. Because of you, Dante said. And Lydia, you both refused to accept my narrative about who I had to be. You did the actual work, Clara countered. We just suggested it was possible. Dante stood, moving around the desk to stand beside her. The space where the tattoo had been was healing, lighter skin showing the ghost of what had been there. Do you regret staying? He asked quietly. Clara considered the question honestly. I regret some of what I've learned. Some of what I've had to compromise on. But no, I don't regret staying. You're trying to build something better, and that's worth supporting. Even though I'm not entirely better myself. Nobody's entirely anything, Clara said. We're all just trying to be a little bit better than we were yesterday. That's all any of us can do. Dante smiled then, genuine and warm. And for the first time, Clara felt something beyond respect or professional admiration. Something complicated and dangerous and entirely human. But that was a different story for a different time. Lydia's voice echoed from the library. Dante, someone sent you documents to sign, and I'm not above forging your signature if they're
important. Dante laughed. Actually laughed. Free and genuine. I should go before she commits fraud in my name. Probably wise, Clara agreed. As he left, Clara stood at the window, looking out over New Haven. The city was still complicated, still corrupt in places, still imperfect. But maybe a little bit better than it had been 6 months ago. And if Dante Vercelli could change, could choose humanity over control, then maybe anything was possible. The final scene came a year after the storm. Clara, Dante, and Lydia stood on the mansion's highest terrace, watching the sun set over New Haven. The city sprawled below them, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. Dante's neck was bare now, the tattoo completely gone, just faint scarring to remember it by. He looked younger without it, less like a crime lord and more like a successful businessman who'd fought hard for his success. You did it, Lydia said, her voice carrying satisfaction. Built something better than fear. We did it, Dante corrected, gesturing to include both women. I was just the tool you used. Don't get too humble, Lydia said with a wicked smile. It's unbecoming. Besides, don't think I haven't noticed you making eyes at my grandniece. Clara felt her face heat. Dante coughed uncomfortably. Lydia just laughed. I'm 84 years old and I'm not stupid. You two have been dancing around each other for months. It's exhausting to watch. Just kiss already. Aunt Lydia. What? I'm old, not dead. Now I'm going inside to watch my shows. You two sort yourselves out. She left with the particular smugness of elderly women who knew they were right. Clara and Dante stood in awkward silence for a moment. She's not subtle, Dante finally said. Never has been, Clara agreed. For what it's worth, Dante said carefully, she's not wrong. About the dancing around each other part. Clara turned to face him fully. Dante, you're my client. You're also a former crime lord trying to go straight. This is complicated. I know, Dante said, but complicated doesn't mean wrong. And I've spent too much of my life avoiding complicated things because they were hard. I'm trying to be braver now. He stepped closer, giving Clara every opportunity to step back. She didn't. What if you backslide? Clara asked quietly. What if the old Dante comes back? Then you and Lydia remind me who I'm trying to be, Dante said. Like you've been doing for a year. I'm not perfect, Clara. I never will be. But I'm better than I was. And I want to keep getting better. With you, if you'll let me. Clara thought about everything she'd witnessed. The violence, the growth, the genuine struggle to be something other than what the world expected. Dante Vercelli wasn't a good man. But he was trying to be a better one, and maybe that was enough. Okay, she said. But I have conditions. Always, Dante said with a smile. You keep working on legitimate business. You keep Lydia close because she keeps you honest. And you never, ever lie to me about what you're doing or who you are. Complete transparency. Deal, Dante said immediately. Anything else? Yes, Clara said, surprising herself with her boldness. Don't get soft on me, devil. You owe me your chaos and your conscience. Dante laughed at hearing Lydia's words come from Clara's mouth. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, he kissed her. It was gentle and complicated and full of promise and risk, just like everything about them. When they broke apart, New Haven glittered below them. A city full of people making choices, living with consequences, trying to be better versions of themselves. The Devil's Oath wasn't about selling his soul. It was about reclaiming it one difficult choice at a time. I've been told that I won't reach my 1K subscriber goal because people don't care about stories like these. Stories about complicated morality, about people changing, about the space between good and evil. But you know what? I'm here to prove them wrong. If you want to see more stories that challenge you, that don't give easy answers, that respect your intelligence, hit that subscribe button right now. Be part of this journey. Show the world that thoughtful storytelling matters. Because Dante's story, it's just the beginning of conversations we need to have about power, change, and the possibility of redemption. And if you made it this far, if you watched a mafia boss become something better, if you believe people can change, drop a comment. Tell me what you thought. Tell me if Dante earned his second chance. Tell me if Clara was brave or foolish. Let's talk about it. Because in the end, that's what these stories are for. Not to give answers, but to start conversations. Not to judge, but to understand. The storm had passed. The devil had changed. And New Haven kept turning one choice at a time.